The Sultan's army was vast, hardened. They had crushed kingdoms, torn down walls, turned proud cities into smoking ruins. But when they crossed the Danube into Wallachia, they found only silence. Villages were deserted, fields smoldered, the wells were poisoned, bridges were gone. There were no scouts, no traders, no sound but the wind in the trees. Then the sickness began. The Ottoman soldiers, thousands of them, grew ill. Water was scarce, food spoiled. They marched further, deeper, into forests, where shadows moved like ghosts. And then they found the first impaled man. A lone figure, slumped forward on a tall wooden spike, arms hanging, birds nesting in his hair. Then another, then 20. A trail of the dead, a corridor of punishment. For days, the army advanced through a landscape twisted by terror. At night, their fires lit the faces of the impaled, some freshly killed, others decayed into shriveled masks. Men began deserting. Horses refused to ride forward, and then they reached Targovik. What they saw there would be etched into the minds of survivors for the rest of their lives. A field, vast, silent, over 20,000 corpses staked upright, lined in rows, mile after mile. Men, women, children, some with limbs removed, some skinned, some, they said, were still twitching. The ground was black with rot, the smell so thick it clung to the throat. Above it all, vultures circled, wolves prowled the edges, and not far off, ... Vlad's banner waved. The Sultan halted. Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, the ruler of a vast empire, sat upon his horse and gazed at the horror. He ordered a retreat. Vlad had faced one of the mightiest armies in the world, and turned it away, not with swords, but with spectacle. He had made death into a message, not just to the Sultan, but to every noble who doubted him, every peasant who whispered rebellion, every ruler who considered Wallachia weak. Come if you dare, the stakes said. This is what awaits. But there was a cost. The people suffered. Villages burned. The economy strained. Fear ruled everything. Even his allies began to distance themselves. But for a time, for a flicker in the long torch of history, Vlad ruled not only his land, but the imaginations of the world. He became a ghost in letters, a legend in taverns, a monster whispered of by kings. And behind the myth, a man, staring across a field of corpses, watching the greatest army in the world vanish into the horizon. Terror, like fire, burns bright, but it consumes all it touches. Vlad's grip on Wallachia began to slip, not from foreign invasion, but from within. The boyars, those noble families he had cowed into submission, began to conspire again. His harsh rule, once accepted as a necessity, was now seen as madness. Even his allies in Hungary, led by King Matthias Corvinus, began to question his methods. And Vlad, ever proud, ever merciless, did not bend. Then a new rumor reached Europe, that Vlad had made a deal with the Ottomans, that he had turned traitor. The irony, it wasn't true, but it was enough. In 1462, while seeking aid in Hungary, Vlad was arrested, a prince, a war hero, now a prisoner. He was dragged to Visegrad, held in a fortress that loomed over the Danube, not tortured, not killed, but forgotten. He would spend over a decade behind stone walls, pacing alone, as his enemies divided his homeland, back in Wallachia. His brother Radu, once soft, once delicate, ruled in his place under Ottoman favor. The land shifted again. The people adjusted. The impaled were replaced by taxes, the terror by compromise. And yet, Vlad endured. Even in chains, he plotted in his cell. He carved drawings of impalement. He fed crows from his window. He kept his mind sharp. Letters survive, full of cold calculation. The years passed. Kings rose. Kings fell. Then, in 1475, the winds turned. The Ottomans pressed harder into Europe. Hungary, now desperate, needed a warlord, someone who knew fear. Who knew the Ottomans? They turned again to Vlad. He was released, restored, armed, and in 1476, he rode once more into Wallachia, not as a prince, as a revenant, his hair grayed, his body scarred, but his eyes burned with the same flame. He reclaimed the throne. The boyars fell silent, and the people waited. Would the stakes return? Would the land again be ruled by the shadow? But this time, Vlad was older, weary. His rule was brief, a final flare in a stormy sky. That winter, the Ottomans came again. His forces were scattered. He was hunted, and then, somewhere near Bucharest, Vlad disappeared. His body was never found with certainty. Some say he was ambushed. Others, that his own men betrayed him. Some say his head was sent to the Sultan in Constantinople, preserved in honey. What is certain is this: the man who ruled with fire vanished into silence. The forests stood. The roads lay quiet. The dragon banner was lowered, but the myth that did not die, for death cannot kill what fear has made immortal, was gone. But the world did not forget. In the decades after his death, travelers passing through Wallachia still found stakes, old splintered, weather-worn. Some stood beside ruins. Some lined overgrown paths. The peasants whispered his name only at night. The Impaler Dracula, not with hatred, but with awe, with fear, with a strange respect. In Saxon towns, German pamphlets told wild tales of his cruelty, that he roasted children, nailed turbans to heads, boiled men alive. Most of it was exaggerated. Some of it wasn't. But those stories spread, printed, copied, read, across Europe, and then came the letter. A single line scribbled by a monk decades later. He drank the blood of his enemies, and he laughed. The spark of fiction caught fire. Centuries passed. In the 19th century, a writer named Bram Stoker opened a history book. He read the name Dracula. The vampire was born, and the man, Vlad III, became a myth made of fangs and capes and cobwebs. But behind the fiction, the real man still lingers. Historians debate him to this day. Was he a sadist? A nationalist? A genius of statecraft? A war criminal? A misunderstood ruler in a brutal age? There is no single truth, only echoes. What is certain is this: Vlad ruled with terror, but he ruled when terror was the only language the world understood. He did not invent cruelty. He reflected it. He was born into a time when kings were poisoned, cities burned for pride, and mercy was often weakness, and he became a mirror of it all. In today's world, we see him through layers: myth, fear, story, spectacle. But when we strip it all away, we find a man who understood one terrible truth: that fear moves people more swiftly than love, that a forest of corpses can silence an army, and that long after the man dies, the terror remains. So tonight, as the candle flickers, and the wind rustles the leaves outside your window, know this: somewhere, buried beneath centuries of legend and dirt, a man once ruled a kingdom of shadows, and he left behind a throne, carved from bone, a forest of bodies, and a name the world would never forget. You've now heard the story of Vlad the Impaler, not the fanged legend, but the brutal ruler who carved his legacy in blood. We hope this quiet journey into darkness helped you rest, reflect, or simply drift into sleep with a deeper sense of the strange, quiet violence of history. Thank you for listening to Dark History. For Sleep. Until next time, sleep well and don't look outside. Before there was Dracula the vampire, there was a man, and he did not drink blood. He spilled it. He did not live in a castle with cobwebbed wings. He ruled from fortresses lined with spears. The real Vlad, Vlad III, Vlad Dracula, a prince, a prisoner, a warlord, a myth. And a terror so vast, that even the Ottoman sultans and the kings of Europe wrote his name in fear. He did not conquer the world. He did something worse. He made it stare into the mirror of its own brutality. This is not a story of monsters. It is the story of a man who used terror as a tool of state, who waged war not just with steel, but with forests of the dead. Tonight, you will hear his life, from the chains of childhood, captivity to the stake-lined roads of Wallachia, from betrayal to revenge, from prince, to Impaler. Let the candle burn low. Let the fire crackle. Sleep well, if you can. In the cold, wind-swept valleys of Transylvania, beneath the jagged spines of the Carpathian Mountains, a child was born into a world carved by fear. It was the year 1431. The shadows of empires crept across the continent, and in a tower above the cobbled streets of Sayasawara, a boy opened his eyes for the first time. His name was Vlad, the second son of a warlord, the heir to a throne. Stained with blood, his father Vlad II was not an ordinary noble. He had sworn himself to the Order of the Dragon, a secretive brotherhood of Christian knights who vowed to defend Europe from the encroaching power of the Ottomans. For this, he earned the name Dracula, the dragon, and his son, born into that legacy, would forever carry the name Dracula. But Wallachia, the land his father ruled, was no sanctuary. It was a thin strip of wilderness wedged between enemies. To the north, the hungry eyes of Hungary watched its borders. To the south, the Ottoman Empire stretched endlessly, swallowing cities, kingdoms, and people. The land was soaked in betrayal. Nobles plotted. Brothers murdered brothers. Kings were crowned with daggers in this land of shifting allegiances. Young Vlad's childhood was brief. By the time he was 11, he and his younger brother Radu were taken by force across the Danube. It was no diplomatic visit. Their father had been summoned by the Sultan, and when he returned, his sons were not with him. The boys were hostages. They were marched under armed guard to the heart of the Ottoman Empire. The sky grew hotter. The language changed. The walls became higher. The guards, colder. They arrived at Edirne, the imperial city of Sultan Murad II, and there, behind carved gates and marble columns, the boys entered a gilded prison. Some days were filled with lectures in Arabic and Turkish. They learned court etiquette, calligraphy, and swordplay. They prayed in silence and memorized the words of the Prophet. But underneath it all, there was violence. Vlad saw executions staged as lessons. He watched men impaled, whipped, drowned, quartered. He learned how pain could bend the will. He saw how the Sultan ruled with silk and steel, one hand offering coins, the other holding a scimitar. His brother Radu adapted. He smiled, learned to dance, to flatter. He became a favorite of the court, close even to the Sultan's son, Mehmet. But Vlad did not forget. He held on to his memories of snow-dusted forests, of his father's throne, of the night his older brother was dragged into a pit and buried alive by Wallachian nobles. He kept a journal, scratched lines into the stone. He rehearsed revenge in his dreams, and then, one day, word came from Wallachia. His father was dead, betrayed, slain by his own council. The throne of Wallachia was empty, and the Ottomans, calculating, always strategic, decided to send young Vlad back, not as a prisoner, as a prince, a ruler raised by the enemy, a pawn they could control. But the boy they sent home was not the boy who had left. He had watched men suffer and learned their limits. He had studied the hearts of tyrants. He had seen fear, and now he would wield it. He returned not to serve, but to punish. The throne of Wallachia did not wait. It devoured. When Vlad returned, he found a land hollowed out. His father's allies were scattered, his enemies entrenched. The Bojars, Wallachia's powerful nobility, ruled like kings over their estates, ignoring the prince, weakening the crown. They had murdered his father. buried his brother. And now they watched his return with mocking curiosity. But Vlad was not the broken boy they remembered. He had learned in the house of his enemies, and he brought with him not just soldiers, but a philosophy, the philosophy of terror. His first reign was brief, lasting just months, before he was driven out by rival factions. But in 1456, he returned with the backing of Hungary and a small but deadly army. This time, he did not ask. He entered Targovect, the capital of Wallachia, with steel in hand. His banner flew high, a black pennant emblazoned with a golden dragon. To the boyars, he extended an invitation, a feast, a celebration of Easter. They arrived in silks and smiles. They ate, drank, toasted. Then the doors were sealed. Vlad stood. He said nothing of Christ, nothing of forgiveness. Instead, he condemned them for betrayal, for cowardice, for murdering his kin. His guards entered the hall. The screams echoed through the night. Some were impaled immediately, their bodies still twitching as dinner was cleared. Others, the young and strong, were shackled and marched north. For days they walked, beaten, starved, to the banks of the Argic River. There, in the foothills of the mountains, Vlad ordered them to build. Stone by stone, they raised his fortress, Ponari, upon the cliffs. Many died beneath its shadow. Their bones paved the walkways. Their hands built the walls of the Impaler's castle. This was how Vlad ruled, with silence, with dread, with fire. He issued edicts. Theft, punished by impalement. Lying by the tongue being torn out. Adultery, by skinning. He impaled beggars, thieves, corrupt merchants, even the poor, if they could not explain their means. One tale tells of a woman who complained her husband worked too hard. Vlad summoned the man, praised his dedication, and had the woman killed for laziness. Order was restored, but not by law, by fear. Merchants wrote of traveling Wallachia with sacks of gold, untouched by bandits. Villages whispered of golden cups left in fountains, never stolen, but always, at the edge of every road, near every town, on the horizon of every mind, where the stakes, forests of bodies, victims impaled, displayed in silence. The wood rotted, the corpses swayed, crows circled above, wolves prowled below. It was not justice, it was spectacle, and yet, it worked. Wallachia became stable, trade returned, order held. But peace, in that time, was a storm waiting to break. To the south, the Ottoman Empire watched. Sultan Mehmed II, who had taken Constantinople and turned it into Istanbul, grew impatient. Vlad had stopped paying tribute. He had insulted their messengers. He was no longer a prince. He was a threat, so the Sultan sent an army. But Vlad did not meet them in open battle. Not yet. He let them come. He let the world taste what he had become, in fire and poison, silence and shadow. Vlad prepared for the moment he would turn from ruler to legend.